what they're basically doing is they're saying, I, as a victim, have a unique experience in life, and nobody can ever empathize with that. So basically, they're saying you're not human for, being able to understand my pain or my trauma. And if you criticize me, you are automatically the racist. It's nothing better than that. I think it's just people who like to whine.
If you know for a fact that you're not a racist, and your parents weren't racist, you're not a terrible person. And when one of these individuals comes up to you, or a mob comes up to you and they tell you you're a racist, you stand tall and you say, no, I'm not. I know what I am.
Hello, my name is Donald, and welcome to WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today, I'm filling in for former President Jacob Zuma. He would have done this show, but unfortunately, he is on sick leave. Today, we're going to tackle some of the pressing issues plaguing South Africa today, with a focus on racism and free speech. We are joined by Hugo Kruger, an engineer who has his own podcasts, links down below, and the Conscious Carousel, Ernst van Zyl, who also has his own podcast, links down below. So, gentlemen, I want to start with the Gareth Cliff saga. I'm not going to explain the short clip for our viewers. I mean, it's only 2 minutes long. You can go and check it yourself. But it seems to me there are three things at play here. There is the argument that he was rude. There is the argument that he was racist for interrupting a black woman. Then there's the argument that he should have his sponsors withdrawn for one or both of these reasons. So the only one I find remotely credible is that he was rude. And I think a relevant quote here is the one from Sun Tzu, who said that if your enemy is making a mistake, don't interrupt him. It would have been simply better if you just allowed her to say her say, give her anecdotal evidence, in which case most South Africans, probably also Black South Africans, would not have found that relatable. Because what he essentially has done now is he has made her a martyr. But yeah, Adam, what is your opinion on this story?
Oh, well, Donald, thank you very much for having me on. I look forward to doing some discussion on these topics that you've chosen. They are very pertinent and relevant now to the world that we live in. I do think there's some themes and some ideas here that are going to be relevant far into the future. It's not just some analysis on the news currently and then it fades away. So what we're seeing here is the type of tactics, or not the tactics, but rather the type of treatment that a lot of people in South Africa, specifically minority groups in South Africa, are subjected to within the news cycle. So my friend Quentin Ferreira is a psychologist and a psychoanalyst, will be able to give you a better reason as to the type of archetypes here at play. But to put it very simply, there's the stereotype of the unrepentant white man, and then there's the stereotype of the African victim, or the perpetual victim. And this lens is what we view our whole society through, due to the zeitgeist that we're in. So what we're seeing here is, for example, let's take the big controversy. Well, there's two big controversies. The one that I want to focus on is this whole idea that John Steenhuisen committed this crime against humanity, where he smirked during this episode, or during this confrontation. Now, again, it doesn't matter what the content is of John's mind. It doesn't matter what his true intentions are. It doesn't even matter whether he smirked or not. Within this context of the unrepentant white and the forever victimized African, this very simplistic worldview, John is, in every possible scenario, he is then viewed as this evil monster. We all know exactly what he's thinking. He's not a individual with agency or any nuance. He's just this racism machine almost. And this is how it's interpreted. And that's why you get some of these responses where people quite arrogantly just claim to know exactly what's going on within John's mind, and to claim to know exactly what's going on within John's heart. And that's not even talking about Gareth, because Gareth is being subjected to exactly the same type of treatment. It's prejudice, it's stereotyping, it's the heart. So what we're actually seeing here is this view that white people are inherently morally inferior to people of color, whatever term you want to give it. That's what we're actually seeing here. They'll never express it. These types of politically or ideologically possessed is how I like to call them. they will never express it in that way. But if you get down to the brass tacks of what we're seeing here, it's that stereotype that white people are all secret racists. They're all just trying to hide it. But that's the same type of stereotyping or the same type of phenomenon as any type of racial stereotype. But for some reason, we're living in this timeline where it's all right to stereotype and be prejudiced towards the white minority in South Africa. And this is what we're seeing here. Both Gareth and John, in this case, are being treated in this way, where people just claim to know exactly what's going on in their minds. They know exactly where their morality lies, and then they judge them, and they judge them very harshly and self-righteously. It's almost like, well, it's become a little bit of a cliche, but it's true. It's that thing of if they sink or float, if they float, they're a witch. If they sink, they weren't. It's like that skit from Monty Python, in that Monty Python film where the townsfolk bring the witch to the gallows, and then the judge or the guard there asks, "How do you know she's a witch?" And then they pause for a second and they say, "She looks like one." And that's what we're seeing here. It's just very simple racial stereotyping, but it's been excused because of the zeitgeist that we're living in.
I would add to that and say that I can't remember where I've posted this on social media or wherever, but people would only be satisfied with John Steenhuisen if he went on a stage with a whip and he flogged himself and said, okay, he has finally repented. That's the only, for some of these political analysts, that's the only way you can finally satisfy these people. But I mean, yeah, Hugo, what's your opinion on this entire story?
Well, this is a long continuation of the victimhood industry playing itself out. I mean, we know that it's the only expanding industry in the dying South African economy at the moment, that if you write a book about being a victim, you are going to become a millionaire very soon. And we're living in this strange world where millionaires like Trevor Noah can tell us how oppressed he is, So it must be a good time, actually. Racism must actually be very good these days, if that is what racism has been reduced to. Look, with respect to Gareth Cliff, was he rude? Probably, but he was rude when he was on Idols. Didn't you see the show? So, suck it up. I don't have a very strong opinion. Did Nando's have a right to do what they did? Probably. It's their money. They can do with what they want with their money. I find the whole situation tiring and stupid, to be honest. I don't know another word of this. I mean, the whole systemic racism, the whole crap behind it, the ideological stuff, if you can even call it that, because, in my view, ideology actually has real intellectuals behind it. What they're basically doing is they're saying, I, as a victim, have a unique experience in life, and nobody can ever empathize with that. So basically they're saying you're not human for, being able to understand my pain or my trauma. And if you criticize me, you are automatically the racist. It's nothing better than that. I think it's just people who like to whine, and I think they need to grow up a little bit and get over it. Gareth Cliff, do you really think he cares if Nando's takes away his contract? I don't.
I think he actually got some new listeners now that he's been in the news so much, and in the news for something that shouldn't even be in the news.
Yeah, exactly. But, is this really our cross to die on? That's my question to these people who get so offended. There's much better causes in this world to associate with and to ask for real justice. This, to me, is a tiring, utterly stupid cause. Okay. But again, it's a good industry. If you've got very few skills in life, you can write a book about being a victim and you become an instant millionaire. So it works for some people. I'm a capitalist by heart. I'm saying if some people have a desired need to feel like a victim, they can write a book about it. And guess what? There's also a white guilt industry to complement that industry, right? So the white guilt is like the masochist, and the black racist movement is the sadist. And a good masochist needs a good sadist. And this is where we're at.
What I also found interesting is that to illustrate that for some people, this will never satisfy them, even if Nando's apologized. I think like Isabel McKaiser, I don't know, the radio talk show host, who's also always promoting. Is it McKaiser?
Eusebius McKaiser is like the woke karate of South African media. He makes money out of talking nonsense. Look, what do we need to do about this?
Just let me quickly say what he said in response to this entire Nando's situation is that Nando's withdraw the entire sponsorship for Gareth Cliff, and he said it didn't go far enough. Nando's should have pointedly said, what he did wrong, that he was a racist, a misogynist, and because they didn't do that, that's not good enough. So it illustrates you can never, for some of these people, you can never satisfy them.
Yeah, it's a cult. It's a religious cult. Remember, you can never be a truly good Christian. You can never be a truly good wokeist, whatever you call it. This is religion we're dealing with. I think as soon as we see it as a religion, you will understand it better. My question is, who's Eusebius Mackenzie? I don't listen to his show. Nobody cares. Okay, it's a guy with an opinion. Good for him.
Ernst?
Well, I would add to it. I think the interesting thing that needs to be discussed, I completely agree with Hugo Kruger that it's not worth your time to use all your resources to just pretty much explain what pretty much anyone can see with common sense. But there is something here that's important, and that's the fact on some people that listen to this and some people that might be the victims of this type of bullying and this type of hate campaign against them. And the best thing, well, firstly, let's sort of what's the worst thing you can do. If you know you're right, with your conscience and your heart and your morality and with your principles, you are right. You do not apologize. Apology, all that will happen, and you see it with the DA posters debacle as well. They apologized, and not a single person that attacked them for those posters accepted their apology. All those people just use that apology as a bigger club to now hit them over the head and say, well, your apology is proof of your guilt. You've just pretty much admitted that you are exactly what we called you. And that's exactly what will happen to you. If you're listening to this and you're ever the victim of this type of campaign or being attacked by the mob, and in your heart you're right, what you are, and those people are calling you something that you are not, do not buckle, do not break, do not apologize. It will only get worse. And I'm not saying this as I want to see more people be tough and strong. I just want people to get out of it on the other side, not worse off but better off. Just from a purely utilitarian point of view, you're not going to be better off if you apologize. From a principled point of view, your soul is going to be in a better state if you don't apologize, if you know you're right. And that's what we're seeing with this in this scenario. More credit to Gareth Cliff for not coming out and ripping his clothes and pouring ash on his head as they would want, because you have to realize you're dealing, as Hugo pointed out, you're dealing with a cult or with a belief system here that doesn't believe in the concept of redemption. They don't believe in the concept of forgiveness. You have original sin. Your original sin is being born white or male or whatever identity they've allocated as their prime enemy number one. And nothing, or even if you're born Afrikaans and you speak Afrikaans, you're also born with original sin, and they are going to look at you with disgust.
-2 brownie points, right? If you're white and Afrikaans, I mean, sorry, means it. Like, you're really going to suffer. You're already classified as being part of hell. So, I mean, their opinions should make it kind of irrelevant. Yeah. All it does is put you in the rank of Dante's Inferno, which level you're going to go to. But I mean, this thing is, I think it's stupid, really. It's a distraction. It's a distraction from real issues. If I was Gareth Cliff, I would just give them a middle finger. I don't think he cares, and go on with it.
I think the great thing, at least about Christianity, is there is redemption. I mean, there's actually a path to salvation, whereas in the woke movement, it seems like there's no path to salvation. But to me, this also illustrates arrogance. I mean, the two of us or the three of us, I mean, there's three people, but we can, for example, we are against this because we think sometimes you just say something stupid, and you shouldn't necessarily be canceled for that. But these people obviously don't believe that. They believe there's no possibility of them ever being racist or being stupid or saying something that's stupid. That's why they're pursuing this agenda. So it also illustrates that these people are also very arrogant, that they are so eager to cancel people because they believe there's no possibility I can ever be guilty of this.
Oh, it's also just the rampant narcissism. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but I know a narcissist when I see them. And it's this idea of my experience trumps anyone else's experience. And you have to listen to what I say. It's the same type of entitlement that you see with the whole kneeling thing. If someone is not following exactly as you want them to live, then I'm going to throw a tantrum. Then I'm going to be angry. Then I'm going to really shame you and attack you and say all the most horrible things about you. And that's what we're seeing. That's and like I said, I don't know any of these people personally, these types of people that make a living out of just race grifting and being in the grievances industry. But most of them strike me as narcissists, and most of them, from what I can speculate, are people that have went through their lives and gotten everything that they ever wanted. All the doors have always opened for them. They've always been, just because of who they are. They've never been rejected from a job because they're white. They've never been in a classroom where the university is supposed to be giving Afrikaans and English classes, and they're just saying, no, we're not going to waste our time with Afrikaans classes. You're going to have to study in your second language.
Well,
they've never been in that. They've never been in that situation where their business is failing because of lockdowns, and now the government is telling them, oh, you're too white, we're not going to give you any pandemic relief. That's what the ANC did during lockdown. So don't come to me with this whole idea that South Africa is just a country of white success stories because they got everything handed to them and white privilege and whatever, and a bunch of the rest are just victims. That's not true. In South Africa, there's no bigger privilege than being born in the house of an ANC cadre when it comes to wealth and opportunities. That you can take to the bank. And look at some of these people. Look at I can't even. So they're irrelevant to me, but you see these people writing books on this grievance industry, and they're all children of politicians or rich. They have rich parents, and they got all these opportunities handed to them. While the guy that should be made the hero are the people that, with all the odds against them, still succeed in South Africa, and those are people of black and white community. You see people that have everything stacked against them, and they still succeed. They're not politically connected, or they're being targeted or disadvantaged because of who they are or how they were born. That's what we see in South Africa, and that's the thing that's so funny about this. Many of these stories is the fact that the majority of the time, from what I can see from my observation, the person claiming to be a victim is actually incredibly privileged. They're coming from a background with so many Rhodes scholarships, you can't even count them on one hand. That's the type of characters that you see here trying to play victim. So don't buy into it. Look at reality as it is and decide for yourself. But if you know for a fact that you're not a racist, and you know your parents weren't racist, you know you're not a terrible person, and when one of these individuals comes up to you, or a mob comes up to you, and they tell you you're a racist, you stand tall and you say, no, I'm not. I know what I am, and nothing you can say will change that. And I'm not going to bend to all your demands, because I know even if I did, you wouldn't accept it. You'd just take even more. So for me, it's very simple. People need to start growing a backbone, and people need to stand up to it. That's the only way we're going to stop this steamrolling of outrage politics, and that's what we're seeing here. And it's, like I said, to end off, it's being driven by some of the most privileged individuals in this country pretending to be victims, and you need to call them out on it. Don't accept their little sad sob stories that they've probably they concocted. You can look into their histories. They've all got, like I said, they've all got these stories of doors opening in all directions, scholarships, bursaries, everything. It's always there. So go check it out for yourself. It starts getting spooky after a while if you start looking at these types of things.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think people should spend too much time being bothered with these people. I agree, don't apologize. It's ridiculous. Nobody cares if you apologize. Probably shouldn't. But honestly, this is just propaganda. It's ideology. It's all the things that are idiotic. The reality is this: there's always going to be any statistic in this world that distinguishes any two groups of people. There's always going to be a statistic to latch on to show that whites are better, blacks are better, A, B, C, D, E. One has got more opportunities than the other. Nowhere throughout human history has any two groups of people ever been the same. You know, I grew up in the same street as Roland Schoeman. I did not go to the Olympics to swim, okay? By definition, he is more privileged to me when it comes to swimming ability. It might have helped that his parents had a swimming pool and mine didn't, but it also might just help that he's got the right body type, and I don't have it. So, I mean, the reality is just that people are bitching and moaning over childish things, as I say. And this is a sign of a child stuck in an adult's body. They've never been criticized before. Whenever they're in a corner, they are basically screaming racism, ethnicity, privilege. The world is against me. It's any excuse but to apologize for their arguments being invalid or for their own failures or things in life. And as Ernst said, we're sitting in this weird society where we've got feudal lords literally telling us how privileged the peasants are. It's weird. I mean, some of the richest black families in this country are basically related to President Ramaphosa. South Africa is an oligarchy. And I bet you if you tell any one of them, listen, do you realize that you are some of the most privileged people on the African continent, some of the most privileged black people in human history, they would tell you, no, the country is racist and discriminating against me. So we've got an elite, and this is not just a South African problem, it seems to be an international one, that we have an elite worldwide that has internalized themselves as being victims. You have kids at Yale and Harvard saying how discriminatory the world is against you. I mean, that's by definition elitist. You find the same in Paris at the Sorbonne, by the way. So, I don't know really where this is going to end. I think it's going to result in silly, unworkable policies. From what I've read on the history of affirmative action, discrimination and stuff, none of the policies that seek to address it actually does anything in the long run. It probably exacerbates the victimhood industry. But I would just like for ordinary people to use a little bit of common sense and to grow up and grow out of this stupidity. And we can then come to, having proper democratic discourse. What is the best policy for energy, for water, for, things that are actually important to growing the economy, as opposed to whatever theology Eusebius Mackenzie is currently involved in.
Social media is not representative of most people, especially Twitter. But yes. I think one person that's almost like a genius on this is Dr. Stephen Davis. He's a libertarian from the UK. And he has said one of the reasons you're seeing woke politics today is an overproduction of degrees, especially in the humanities area. Because now
I can tell you that's true as someone with a humanities degree.
Well, what you're now seeing is all these people have these degrees, but they're struggling to find work in certain areas. And they're basically using the woke movement to eliminate the competition.
They're creating industries for themselves. It's actually entrepreneurs. In a way, you should take your hat off for them.
It's genius.
But somewhere along the line, the law of supply and demand went missing. We thought that we're going to push kids to university like a factory, and then we realized that engineering mathematics is, these cognitive abilities that block some people. So what do you do with everyone else? Well, you can only dumb down the humanities. So the humanities, when my grandparents did it in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, was probably more challenging because they actually had to know Greek and Latin, which is very difficult. Today, you can get in there with a C- in English, and you don't even need to do Afrikaans or any of the other languages for that matter. And you can do a degree in victimology. Okay, so if a good indication if a study is a victimology is if it has the word studies attached to it, that's usually a degree to avoid. I saw the University of Stellenbosch, by the way, has opened a department of climate studies. Studies. That's at Stellenbosch, Ernst's alma mater. I'm very sorry to hear that. That is the death of a university. As soon as a degree goes from anything to studies attached to it, that is a dead field of inquiry. It means that they actually tell you stop thinking for yourself. That's what you get. So you have a factory for 3 years telling kids you're a victim, and if you dare to question it, you're crazy. And that is the product that we're sending out into society. The solution to this is the solution to most things, I think, is it's the economy stupid. I think as soon as people have jobs and real problems and families and real responsibilities, they don't have time for this nonsense anymore. And then all of that will go away. So it's actually a good argument to say, if we want to deal with victimology, we can actually just grow the economy.
Well,
and, something else that to go for it, Donald.
Just quickly, I want just to add to that, and I'll go with you, Ernst. But I don't know if you guys know Eric Weinstein. He was pushed out of Evergreen because he didn't want to attend. Well, he did attend the only black event at the university, and he was pushed out of the university. But he has said that in a recent interview with Joe Rogan, he has said that to illustrate how the faculties, especially humanities and psychology, has fallen. There's a recent guy who pursued a doctor's degree, and he did it for a joke. He wrote a thesis on how, I guess this is a bit crass, but how the penis is a social construct responsible for climate change. and it went through all the loopholes.
Men are responsible for all the problems in the world. Don't you get it, Donald?
But I mean, it went through all it. I mean, you almost got a doctor's degree, and
I think the guy that wrote that was James Lindsay.
Yeah, well, that it could have been, but I mean, and I mean, for the study, he did a ridiculous amount of research. Like, I mean, he studied like 10,000 dog penises. I mean, apparently, I mean, it's a joke, but I mean, apparently, he studied 10,000 penises of a dog to show, okay, the penis is responsible for climate change. It just illustrates how the problem in many of these faculties. But yeah, the only reason why this didn't go through is because of a journalist from Wall Street Journal found this, and obviously someone with half a brain knows this can't be true. And yeah, concurrently, the thesis, he was not granted his doctor's degree. But Ernst, yeah, sorry, what did you want to say?
No, it's I actually want to add to something that Hugo said about they create, or they're entrepreneurs. So there was always this cliche of people when they see these types of social justice types saying, oh, but they're going to get into the real world and then they're not going to be able to get a job. That's absolutely not true. They're getting jobs left, right, and center. They are actually very successful in real life because of the principle of creating demand. So all they do is you create this controversy around a company. They said something that's apparently insensitive or whatever. Then that company realizes, we need to change this. We need to do something about it. So all these types of, as Hugo said, these studies graduates come to that company and say, well, I'm a diversity officer or whatever. You need to, if you employ me, I'll make sure all this trouble goes away and your company is going to be in the clean books. So they create demand. They are very good at what they do. And you only need one of these ideologues in your company, and they're going to start promoting their friends. They're going to bring in their cult members and more people like them, and soon they're going to be running the show. And that's what they do. So that's why you get these types of outrage cycles. You get it in the US, you get it in South Africa, you get it everywhere. Because with every one of these cycles, it scares a bunch of corporates absolutely shitless. And then they appoint a lot of these types of study graduates that are going to make the problem go away. It's just extortion at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, the problem is this. So Jonathan Haidt, the psychologist, actually explained it quite well. Since 2010, the world has gone just crazier in cults. There's cults everywhere. And one reason is Facebook added the like button. That was one of the most significant things that happened in the last 10 years. And unfortunately, it's a sad thing that happened because it means we're all in our own echo chambers now. We don't hear the opposite views. So you find these weird cults all over the show. You find the green climate cult, the sustainability cult. You find the woke cult, the Black Lives Matter cult. On the right-wing side, you also have the QAnon cult. That was also a weird thing. You also have the Falun Gong, which is a cult that says their organs are being harvested by the Chinese, and it's complete fabrication. The Grey Zone did an expose on it because they believe, thinks it's better. So unfortunately, we have cults all over the world, and we're living in this weird times now. I think the only comparable moment to me would be it's a Gutenberg moment when Martin Luther wrote the Bible. And it was actually preceded by the printing press. As soon as the oral tradition was replaced by the printing press, people went a bit crazy. The sad part is back then, Europe went into a 30 years war. And that's kind of what we don't want to have at the moment, right? We're trying to avoid that again. And they killed for religion, by the way. And there was a very good book, unfortunately written in German, called Ignoramus, basically. And the book of Ignoramus basically showed how people for 30 years killed each other over which Protestant or Catholic version was the correct interpretation of the Bible. I feel kind of like if we don't allow these cults to grow, that is kind of where we're going to go, because Ernst is not going to take the proper knee, and I am going to use carbon, and Donald is going to, go and meditate in the garden. And all of a sudden, none of us are pure enough in whatever we're doing, and the cult's going to come for you.
Well, I think that the religion wars were everywhere in Europe. I mean, I think it was in England also, for example. But I'm also, to that point of Jonathan Haidt, what was interesting is that he pointed out that there's a direct correlation between social media and the rise in youth, women, suicide rates. I think the suicide rates of women increased by
but that has been disputed, though. That has been disputed. It's not as comprehensive. He looked at anecdotal data. So no, the impact of social media is actually exaggerated. It's actually a net benefit, I think. But unfortunately, you have these crazy kids that are just lost cases, unfortunately. But they seem to be set up for corporate employment at Davos. So there's that incentive structure problem. But in general, Jonathan Haidt's views, I think, has been exaggerated. It is a problem, but it's a problem that I think people are overcoming, because more and more people are aware, like, look, if Johnny is too much into sustainable racism, maybe he needs to go out and play with his friends a little bit. And parents are saying, okay, wait a minute, this kid this is something wrong with him, right? So we are going to that world.
Well, I wish I could believe that, but yeah, Adam, anything you want to add to that?
No, it's I think the only solution is to really build your own institutions, as we're doing at AfriForum and Solidarity Movement. I don't think the universities can be saved. I think I think we're now in that opportunity to build again, an opportunity to rejuvenate and renew, and not just focus on battles that we've already lost and that you can't really recover. So I think the only real way to get out of this situation, whether it be in South Africa or in the West, is to start building again, build new institutions, build new communities, new family bonds, build new statues. There was that story of there was this statue built in New York. I think it was last year. I'm talking under correction. I think it was a African culture statue, and it was built like in the middle of New York somewhere. And then a lot of conservatives say, no, but this has nothing to do with America. And my response to it was, when was the last time you guys built a statue? When was the last time you erected a monument? When was the last time you actually built something beautiful that you can also parade around, like these leftists are parading around their statue and all their George Floyd statues and whatever? Start building your own stuff. Don't just focus on what the other guys are doing. Build your own statues, build your own monuments, create your own art, write your own books. That's something that conservatives need to start doing again, is to start creating art again. Don't just be a movement reacting to what the left is doing. Start creating again. Do as that's what the Bible means when man was created in God's image, because we can, like God, create something out of nothing through your creativity and through your mind and imagination. And that's the thing that people need to start doing again. That's the thing that gives people hope. That's pushing back. If you're worried about the ugly postmodernist art out there, start painting some beautiful art. If you can paint, start painting some beautiful art. If you don't like the type of horrible storytelling that you're seeing out there in Hollywood and all these movie franchises, if you can make movies, if you're passionate about film, start making your own movies. Start creating. That's the only way that you fight this tide of just madness, like
propaganda
and
of propaganda.
Absolutely.
Well,
I mean, like, just my last point on this, and I think we can actually move to, if you're okay with it, to another topic, because I think we are spending too much time on this. I think Douglas Murray made this point as well. Like, there are so many other interesting questions and issues to solve worldwide than to worry, about these cult-like things. Okay, that's there. You need to resist it, grow a thick skin against it. But it speaks more to Ernst's point that move on, I think. I also think there's a lot of people, and maybe on the conservative side, who make a living out of bitching about this. Just they try and point out all the woke problems in the world, and then they write an essay about it. None of that gets us anywhere. Just build something and ignore these people and do whatever the hell you want. And I think the people who are doing that are the ones that at the end of the day are going to win out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's definitely a sort of a reactionary side to the Republicans, especially in America, that they don't really propose solutions. They're only saying this is bad. But okay, so Hugo, what should we be talking about? What is really some of the main problems in the world today?
A big issue on my mind is the energy crisis. I think it is the issue. But it is that it's against the climate cult who wants us to have impractical solutions, and it is sending people into fuel poverty. Gas prices are through the roof, for example. So how do we address this thing? And my solution is we should ignore the people that are being extremist about climate change as well. And we should try and get what was called dispatchable energy down, cheap electricity to the home, because that creates prosperity. Right, that is one issue that I think is important. Another issue for South Africa that's very important and on my mind at a time is the water crisis, particularly because I studied with Syrian refugees when I was here in Paris, and they would tell you that war. Okay, first of all, the evidence was fabricated by the MI6, but one reason why that war started was because of a water crisis in the countryside. People ran to cities, there was no water. Before you know it, they started shooting each other. You can see that when I travel through Iran, there's some rivers running dry. So my question is, if we want to avoid the issues of the Middle East, we need to start desalinating seawater. We need to start realizing that South Africa has ran out of water 10 years ago already. And we're only kicking the can down the drain because our capacity is reducing year by year. That is one example. So I think issues that are practical to longevity, to sustaining a high quality of life is important. The free market economy, property rights, all of these things, and not get trapped into the bitching and moaning about irrelevant issues.
Ernst, are those also problems of poverty and socialism?
No, there's certainly a very strong point to be made there from Hugo's side, where there are more important things to focus on. I would say another thing that's important that needs to be focused on is just building stronger communities and making sure that people are where they are living now in an increasingly atomized world are able to cope with it. As there might be more chaos around them, as we saw, for example, with the looting and rioting in South Africa earlier this year, the only thing that's going to protect you are the people around you. You can't really fend off a mob with pepper spray and while you're alone as well. But if there's 100 guys with their legal firearms there, that's a completely different picture. And that's what we saw during the riots. When the shit really hits the fan, when things really start getting tough, people start banding together and they defend their property and they defend their lives and their families. And that's what people need to start doing. You need to start getting these things in place, these networks. You need to know the name of your neighbor. If you're in trouble, who are you going to call in your street? Who's going to be within driving distance? If you're living in Pretoria, you're going to call your dad that lives in Cape Town. I don't think that's going to work. You're going to call your best mate that lives in Australia, or you're going to call the guy that's 2 houses down in the street if there's trouble. That's what you need to start doing. Start becoming part of safety structures. Join a neighbor. If there's a crime problem in your community, join a neighborhood watch. You don't have to join a neighborhood watch if you're living in some security estate, but it would still be good if you were to just maybe go join a neighborhood watch for one night so you can see what they're doing and to get some perspective on that. But if you're living in a community where your security is something that you worry about, set up a neighborhood watch or join one that already exists. And you can start small. Don't try to save the world. That's the other thing that's driving people insane and psychotic, is that people believe that they can change the world. I was taught in school that I need to grow up to change the world, and it doesn't work. You can't change the world. You're going to just run into a wall and you're going to be depressed and nothing's going to make sense to you. Start small. Think on what can you do. Are you worried about the moral decay that you see around you in your country or even the world? Don't try to morally then save the country or the world. Just make sure that good values and good principles are practiced in your household and in your friend group and in your community. Then that will start multiplying. Are you worried about all the rubbish and all the pollution and everything around you? And I'm not talking about in the climate cult sense. I'm an old school environmentalist. I care about cleaning rivers and planting trees and living in a beautiful, clean environment. I think that's much more impactful and makes a much bigger difference. If you're worried about that, if you're worried about how dirty things are around your community or even in your street, make sure there's no rubbish lying outside on your porch or in your garden. Make sure there's no rubbish lying in your street. That does not take a lot of time or energy. If you encounter a piece of rubbish, pick it up, throw it in the trash. I think you have a moral duty to live in a beautiful area and in a beautiful place. And if it's not beautiful, you can go a long way towards creating more order and making it more beautiful. And if you're worried about safety and you're worried about security, join a neighborhood watch. AfriForum has over 150 neighborhood watches all across the country. Go check out our website if there's one near you. And the next step would be also to get your legal firearm license and then to get your legal firearm. I'm currently in that process. It's a very long process, but I've done the hard stuff already. So now it's just a waiting game. And,
what can you shoot with that license? Can you
Excuse
have
me?
pistol? What can you shoot with that license? A pistol, rifle?
I haven't got my license yet, but I've got my competency now for 4 types of firearms.
And those would be? It's probably like just a max a rifle.
It's a handgun, a shotgun, a rifle, and a semi-automatic.
Interesting. But Hugo, it seems to me that every country really has its own problems. I mean, it might be the water problem or a climate change problem for some people in Syria, but South Africa, it seems to me, the main problem here is safety and security, especially with the recent riots.
In the Middle East, it's also safety and security. I mean, I think it's probably a bit worse than South Africa, depending, because that's actual warfare. But yeah, I mean, yes, every country has its own issues. Everyone has got its own issues. And I think individuals are the best to judge what are the issues in their world. And, it helps to connect. That being said, I don't really know my neighbors because I stay in apartments and we tend to not know each other that well. But I've got a friend group here in France where I stay.
But doesn't AfriForum have a watch there?
Well, no, not over here.
Oh, okay.
It's in firearm ownership in Europe is also not really encouraged, especially in Western Europe. But it doesn't stop people from smuggling in AK-47s across the Sahel. So those things still happen here. But no, I mean, those are relevant issues. I tend to actually be quite an optimist. By the way, I don't think global institutions are going to solve any of these issues. I think that's just a fantasy. I do think that people need to start asking themselves questions maybe about these global institutions, UN-wise, who seems to have annoyed everyone the last 2 years with the same get build back better mantra. But, again, those are ideas on paper. How they work in reality, it remains to be seen. The other threat, I would say, is people need to start questioning the Chinese social credit system, and that there's a few dictatorships, especially on the African continent. Fortunately, we don't have 5G, that would like to play an experiment with those things. And privacy, the right to privacy, is also an important issue. It tends to be a left-wing issue, surprisingly, but it should actually be a right-wing issue as well. That where does the authority of the government end? Okay, with spying on my communications, things of that sort, NSA, Edward Snowden type of things. So yeah, these are relevant issues, and we can discuss them like grown-up people. And I don't think you need to invoke, to get back to the original topic, race and nationalism and all of these nonsenses to try and solve any of them.
Sorry, just quickly, if it wasn't climate change, I don't know what your opinion is, but what happened? What was the cause of the water crisis in Syria?
They didn't build enough dams. It's quite obvious.
Same story in South Africa.
It's very similar to South Africa. If you don't build enough dams and if you don't start to desalinate the seawater, you're going to run out of water. If you have more people than you've got water, you don't need to be a genius to figure out what's going to happen. Population grew and the government did nothing because they were corrupt. Same story in Lebanon, by the way. They're running out of food. They've got food prices at the moment. And you won't believe this, but in Lebanon, the politicians were corrupting the political system. I mean, that would never happen in South Africa, right? They were corrupting the judicial system so people couldn't dispute land claims, for example. Then they had hyperinflation. We would have thought that the bankers would be corrupt enough and to be in bed with the politicians. It's like that would never happen in South Africa. So these are the things. Institutional failure is one thing to look out for. Although I tend to think institutional failure is rather a consequence of the bad incentive structure that the legal system has in place. If there's not enough divisions of power, you will find that. So, but yeah, the way humans tend to organize, we tend to organize ourselves in community and in institutions to solve certain relevant problems. And as I say, the water crisis is one of the many relevant issues to solve. The carbon dioxide one is a fantasy one. It's not a problem.
So, Ernst, it seems like we're beginning to see the same state institutional problems here in South Africa, whether it's electricity or water. What's this going to lead to? Are we also going to see a sort of a revolution in South Africa if these things are not improved?
Well, I'm not Senior van Rensburg, so I can't really tell you whether a revolution is on the way or what's going to happen. But what I can tell you is if we're going down the same path that we are now, the riots and the plundering that we saw earlier this year is not going to be an isolated incident. Mm-hmm. I think the future of South Africa is unfortunately very uncertain, but at the same time, South Africa is also a frontier. There is definitely going to be a lot of challenges in the future, but luckily enough, I'm employed in the solution industry, so there's going to be a lot of work for me. I'm not going to be out of the job anytime soon. So when it comes to South Africa, we're going to have to think innovatively. We're going to have to think outside the box. We're going to have to think of solutions that the world hasn't even thought about, because the world isn't, much of the Western world isn't experiencing the problems that we are experiencing. But at the same time, being a pioneer means you are going to be working on solutions that other countries in the world, specifically the West, might start doing crypt notes and copying in the future, because you are.
Well, I have an anecdote on that one. The London Underground bought a Trelidor from South Africa because people were jumping over the tube. So we are exporting our security systems. I mean, that's being a leapfrogger. Yeah.
That's what you do. But yeah, that's the excitement and the fulfilling part of being a pioneer, is knowing that you're working on solutions that many of your fellow men in other countries can't even imagine. And you're working on solutions for problems that many of them can't even imagine, not even talking about the solutions. So when it comes to the West, also, I also think it's hyperbolic to think that the West is going to, or Western countries are going to turn into South Africa overnight or within the next 10 years. It's a very slow process of just normalizing back into equilibrium, basically becoming a normal country. And that's what you see with many of these countries, where things are going backwards, not forwards. But at the same time, it's not something that I'm knowledgeable enough to make predictions of this is going to happen at this time, within this time period. I'm very skeptical of people that do that type of prediction. People that tell me, well,
that's another industry, by the way.
The doomsday prediction industry.
Well, the scenarios of the future industry as well. Look at the Institute of Race Relations. That seems to be their business model. Now I want to see if they're going to cancel funding. I don't get any from them. But I'm very skeptical of somebody with a scenario or a prediction of the future. I said to Ernst this some weeks or some months ago on his podcast that if Nostradamus lived today, he would have used an Excel spreadsheet with graphs and sophisticated. He would have been a scenario planner for a business developer. I don't buy it. I don't think anyone has got any ability to predict the future. What I do know, though, is if you have bad governance in a country, things tend to decay. At least if history is, history is anything to go by. But I tend to be very skeptical of people who predict the end of the planet, the end of the world, climate predictions, economic doomsday predictions, for next financial crisis prediction. Peter Schiff has been predicting one for the last 10 years every day, and it happened to be right once. And then
you should just buy gold. That's Peter Schiff's remedy for everything.
So you're not on the Bitcoin train, Donald.
Yeah, but Bitcoin's price was going to go down, then it was going to go up. I bought some Bitcoin, but I didn't put my pension fund into it. So I don't know if that's any investment advice. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone has any ability to predict the future. That's just beyond humankind, right? I think Matthew 24, I'm not very religious actually, says something of the sort that no man knows neither the hour nor the day. So yeah, I think that is a very wise quote. Be very skeptical of prophets because they tend to have a very bad track record of being correct.
And they've got a very, very bad track record of revising their predictions as well.
Yeah, or being very ambiguous as the data comes in. So yeah, the first climate prediction of James Hansen, 1989, said the world was going to increase its temperature by like 10 degrees until the end of the century. Al Gore predicted the polar ice cap would have been gone 5 years ago. It's still standing and it's increasing.
6 years ago now.
6 years ago. Greta Thunberg, I think she's got 4 or 5 years left on her prediction of the end of the world in 9 or 12 years, something like that. So anyways, I've got a list of them. There's a very good website called Extinction Clock that tells you all the climate predictions. And we were supposed to be underwater by now, which would be amazing.
But all the global elites are buying beachfront property like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think people need to be more skeptical of these narratives that they're being sold. And then you realize very quickly, I mean, it's a very old school thing. I sell you a story, and then on the other side, I've got my products ready, right? And just ask who is making money out of the story. And it's also a case that as some businesses are too big to fail, they get bailouts. Some stories are also too big to fail. COVID-19 was one of those stories. It was clear from the first or second month that this thing was complete nonsense. And yet people are still sticking to the narrative because they've invested so much emotional time and money.
It's now a sunk cost.
It's now a sunk cost. Now it has to get bailed out. And we're seeing it, right? So yeah, too big to fail stories. Racism is one of them probably. It's a supply and demand problem. The amount of racists in South Africa has decreased exponentially, but the amount of need for racism has increased exponentially. And now you've got this point where there's no longer equilibrium. Now we're trying to find racism everywhere where there isn't any. So everything that looks black and white
racism in a smirk.
Yeah, a zebra is now racist, right? It's a systemically racist one because the black spots on top or below the white spots or something of the sort with a black stripe.
But how do you know? It can be racist. Perhaps he doesn't mean
Chase is definitely racist because the white pieces move first.
Yeah.
Yes, chess. I remember when I played the South African, when we played chess championships when I was a child, there was one stage where people seriously considered changing the black pieces to make them blue because white gets to move first. You know, that's a very racist game to teach your kids chess, for example. You know, so you've got stupidities like this all over the place. But yeah, anyway, the point is some stories are too big to fail. Some prophecies are too big to fail. Be skeptical and realize that governments work by fear, right? People control you when they can scare you. So the less scared you are, the more you realize this is a repeating pattern, the more resilient you will become to this nonsense. And I said, then you can actually solve your own problems. And if everyone tries to solve his own problems on a community, individual level, I think society's problem will be much easier to solve. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, especially on climate change. My question is always, what is the worst case scenario? I mean,
well, so if you look at the UN's predictions, they've got what they call the RCP numbers, representative. I can't remember what the CB, climate something. Anyway, climate projection probably, or something of the sort. So they've got the 8.5 model. And that is the one that predicts that methane will be released from the Arctic. And by the year 2100, we're all going to be toast. That is the one that all the politicians are quoting when they say nobody can deny it's a climate prediction. Well, that's one assumes that we burn more coal than there are coal reserves in the world. Okay. Coal has actually been declining. So that is just not possible. So if you remove the doomsday prediction from climate change, it says at the end of the century, at worst, it'll be 3 to 4 degrees warmer. Now, if I do this, that's 2 degrees. It's not going to, the difference in the Karoo from the morning to the afternoon is something 30 to 40 degrees. And if you look at all the climate ways they derive the data, it actually means we're going to have less cold and the heat stays the same. Okay. Because it makes sense. If you put the heat flux, it's going to eat the cold out first, right? So you find that actually also they predict that agricultural yield will increase. Nobody's talking about the benefit of it because CO2 is good for plants, for example. So you can go on with these things and then just realize this is all just prophecy. It's a doomsday story so people can monetize nature and make money out of wind farms and schemes like this thing. Yeah.
And everything that we're seeing around us has a parallel in history, not just one parallel, thousands of parallels. For example, these types of doomsday prophecies, they've just rebranded them a little bit. Same goes for systemic racism. It's just the satanic panic 2.0. Back in the days, they said if your child's listening to rock music, he's going to turn into a Satanist and he's going to start
Pokemon Tazos.
Yeah, Pokemon Tazos were also satanic. And then parents were very scared and they started panicking. There was a moral panic. Today, it's if your child is watching YouTube, if he's listening to Jordan Peterson, if he is listening or watching game videos by PewDiePie, he's going to turn into a literal Nazi. I still think
Jordan Peterson is a cult figure.
I also think that.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. We get to that point where people think that there's just like your neighbor is just a Nazi. There's just a bunch of racist people and evil people walking around, and it's a moral panic. So when they see just a little bit of a hint of something that might appear like it falls into this category, then they immediately come to the conclusion that this person is a secret witch, and therefore we need to throw her into the river to see if she floats or sinks.
You're a heretic, right? And the new modern word for a heretic, well, there's a few of them. Racist is one in South Africa. If you say BE is corruption, it's you're a racist. If you say that there is corruption in the way the WHO organizes with the pharmaceutical companies to push this ridiculous injections, you're a conspiracy theorist. If you say climate change is complete nonsense, you're a denialist. Okay. And this, I guess we can segue into the free speech issue that you wanted us to talk about as well. This is the problem with free speech, or when you start censoring people, is that eventually you're going to start labeling them and you're going to end up with one dogmatic viewpoint that becomes state ideology. And I think climate change is one of them.
I also think denialists as an association with Holocaust deniers. That's one of the reasons why they used it. But I think Ernst wanted to finish his point.
Oh yeah, no, just very briefly. So you got all these types of parallels in the past, and you see the exact thing happen today. Where if you just look at these moral panics and these mass hysterias of the past, you'll see so many parallels that you can't unsee it later. So you just have to go look at one of them. Just go look at the satanic panic, or go look at some of these earlier climate predictions where people were saying the
There's a
world was
very
going to
good
freeze.
book that is called The History of Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by Madison McKay. And we had the famous saying, men, it is seen, go mad in herds and recover their senses one by one. Something, I'm paraphrasing him now. But we are a tribal animal. So we scare them in groups, and then one guy's like, wait a minute, this thing doesn't add up. And unfortunately, it takes more time to debunk scare stories than to spread them. So this is a thing that we didn't evolve very well against threat scoring. But on the nihilism, it's sort of like conspiracy theorists. So the word conspiracy theorist became popular after the Warren Commission by the CIA, or where the CIA sent a memo around to all the news agencies in America, because the Americans knew instinctively that, listen, the way Kennedy died was not well reflected in the findings of the Warren Commission. It was set up to failure type of thing. Sort of like the Zondo Commission. It doesn't, you realize that there's a BS story behind it, but you cannot add up, exactly what's happening unless you spend time to dig into it. With regards to the nihilists, it's true that it's associated with Holocaust denialism, and I assure that's not one that I try and associate myself with. But if you actually look at the history of the usage of the nihilist, it started in the year 2000, and that is because the Earth stopped warming. Okay, the lower troposphere hasn't warmed much since 1998. And then all the people who said, wait a minute, this climate stuff or the global warming stuff doesn't add up, they were started to be calling them global warming denialists, but that didn't work. So CNN rebranded global warming as climate change. And if you dare to question climate change, something you cannot prove or disprove, you're a denialist. The climate is changing. It's always changing. I mean, it's a vague, vacuous statement. And that's how the word denialist became popular.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
mean,
very
there was
similar.
a time when you were able to grow grapes in England and make wine.
Yeah, that was the medieval warm period, was a time of human prosperity. And we might even be getting close to those temperatures again. So yeah, it'd be amazing if there's grapes in Scotland again. I think it'll be a wonderful place to go to. The UK might actually be an immigration destination then.
Yeah, but I mean, Ernst, guys, I think we're running out of time. This has been a very fascinating conversation. Ernst, anything last words that you have, or where can we find you? Where can you find your podcast? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, well, I've just got some brief final words, and that is, in a world as chaotic and sometimes as confusing and even scary as the one that we live in, or even a country as chaotic and scary as the one we live in here in South Africa, the only thing that will really be a solid thing to stand on will be your principles and your community and the people around you. So don't take it on alone. Make sure you have friends. Make sure you have loyal friends. Make sure you're on good terms with your family where possible, and make sure you have friends that will have your back. Make sure that you stick by your principles. So when you get challenged on them and you know you're right, there's that old saying of, it's better to fight against the entire world than to fight against your own conscience. So I think as long as you know your principles are sound, as long as you know that you are in the right in a situation, don't back down, don't apologize, don't give these demonically possessed and ideologically possessed people what they want. Don't grovel before them, because they're just gonna spit on you again. You're not gonna be redeemed. They're not gonna forgive you. So the best thing you can do is determine what is right, determine what are your core values and stick by them. And that's what people need to start doing. And that's why with this whole poster debacle of the DA, them taking down the posters was an infinitely stronger message than them putting up the posters, because they were pretty much saying, if enough people are angry at us, if enough people are screaming in our face, we will back down on any type of principle. Because if you can't stand up for a poster, you're not going to stand up against EWC. And that's why it made such an impact, and why so many people were angry, because they took it down. And that's why my advice to people is, the best thing you can do today is to stick by your principles. Don't fight against your conscience. Fight against the entire rest of the world. And at least all the hardship that you're going through is an opportunity to be righteous and to live a righteous and a principled life, and a life that you can be proud of, and a life that you can actually feel fulfilled in and not feel like a pathetic little worm. So when it comes to where people can find me, they can find me on my YouTube channel, Conscious Caracal. I do apologize for how hard it is to spell. I wasn't planning on making more than one video. And you can also follow me on Twitter, also Conscious Caracal. And if you also want to support what I do, don't give me money, become a member of AfriForum. If you live in South Africa and you're not a member yet, become a member. That's how you can support a cause that is bigger than yourself. And rather than giving me money, I want you to, if you want to help, rather support a cause like that. Or if you're living abroad, you can become a friend of AfriForum, and you can just Google Friends of AfriForum and you can become a supporter as well. So that's pretty much where you can find me. And if you like these types of topics that we discussed, I'm a bit more focused on, like Hugo also said earlier, on issues that I think are important. So you'll be able to find them on my channel. I talk about maybe some topics that even some of the listeners here might not agree with, but go check it out and you be the judge.
Perhaps I'm being stupid. You're saying Conscious Caracal, not Conscious Carousel.
No, Caracal.
What's the difference?
It's a rooikat.
Well, okay.
So the English word for a rooikat is a caracal.
That's
Rooikat is
interesting.
an English word. Who the hell knows caracal?
That's interesting. Okay, yeah, well, I'll just also add to that. I mean, you can never please the SABC. I mean, if you just watch that interview they did with John Steenhuisen, I think for some reason they had to have like 4 journalists interviewing him, all trying to interrupt. I mean, why can't you just have one person? But yeah, Hugo, last words, how can people find you?
So I've got a podcast in my name, Hugo Kruger, on Odyssey at the moment. That's my main home. I've got still a YouTube podcast, but I've had strikes against my name for daring to question official state ideology. So I don't know how long that's going to last. Yeah, I tend to cover issues that are a little bit less political, although I had Ernst on to talk about land expropriation once. But generally, I talk about scientism issues. So it's when science becomes a dogmatic belief, and climate change is one of them. HIV and AIDS is one of them. So yeah, I guess I'm a AIDS denialist, a climate change denialist, a germ theory denialist, I don't know what else denialist, everything except Holocaust denialism you will find on my channel. 9/11 skeptic, I suppose, is one of them, truther, things of that sort. So I've got all those issues on my channel, and if people are interested in those views, they can listen to them. I guarantee you they will be offended, and that's the point of it. And if you don't like being offended, don't subscribe to my channel. I would like if you can send me money, Bitcoin, please. My account is there. That'll be very good. Or subscribe to AfriForum. They can send me Bitcoin. I'm not a member though. Yeah, I'll say that. And then, yeah, Donald, it's been fun. Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. One last question, Hugo. Was the planes that flew into the towers, were they controlled or were they manned?
So here's a very good book that I'm reading at the moment. It's called Unmasked by David Ray Griffin on the 9/11. It shows all the holes in the official narrative. I believe the attacks were instigated. Okay. And I do believe that the, okay, let me put it this way. The US Army ran war games on the very day of 9/11, predicting a plane is going to run into the building. Now, either Osama bin Laden from a fort cave in Afghanistan was very lucky organizing those things by satellite phones and for communications, or something fishy happened within the US administration. That being said, 2 months before COVID-19, there was Event 201, where the CIA, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all the dodgy guys predicted a coronavirus 2 months before it happened. Now, either they are very good at prediction and prophecy, and maybe Ernst and I should talk to them about their models of the future, or they are selling us a BS story and the whole thing is bloody planned. So I'm a COVID skeptic, and I'm a 9/11 skeptic, thanks to COVID, by the way. They got me down that rabbit hole. I don't know if it's going to make me friends or enemies in the process, but I am a structural engineer, I'll say that. So I am actually qualified to say that Building 7 could not come down from fire. And there's a very good study by the University of Fairbanks, Alaska, peer-reviewed study showing all the columns had to come down simultaneously. Now, how does that happen? Well, it has to be instigated, and maybe it's controlled demolition. But, you know, I'm crazy for asking that question.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Before we get cancelled, I think we should conclude this conversation. To our viewers, if you've made it this far, you most certainly enjoyed this content. So please consider liking this video, sharing it as widely as possible, and subscribing to our channel. My name is Donald, and you've been watching WorldView.